Welcome everybody, I'm John Wally, and today we're moving into episode 8, where we're going to continue optimizing our policies and events, and this is going to be our part 3 of this section. We're going to be wrapping up on our communication to external. So I know we've been covering that for the last 2 episodes, but it's such a big policy that to external and from external that you're going to spend a lot of time cleaning that up in an open environment. But we're going to wrap that up today and hit on a couple of last things on how to test what certain equipment is and when you're starting to do that investigation where you're picking up those last 2 or 3 assets. We're going to go through and talk about our next biggest policy hit that you're going to experience, and that's going to be conversations in commonly exploited protocols. And we're going to talk about how that looks from setting that up so it's only internal assets, looking at some of those protocols that we may find in industrial environments is typically not acceptable in an IT environment. And then we're going to talk about exclusion rules or exclusion policies. And that's not something we've covered yet. And it's something that we'll be working with as we go through network threats. So let's go ahead and jump in. All right, so I've logged in. The first thing that I'm going to do is we've done a little bit of testing, and when I was off camera between episodes, I went through and turned all of my policies back on just to make sure what's working and what's not working out there. So I'm going to go to my status here, and I'm going to check to see anything that's off, and I'm going to hit apply. Now, not everything should be on. If you don't have certain controllers in place or if you don't have certain environments, then you're not necessarily going to want everything on. The reason I went and filtered on what's off is I'm still looking for these policies that have generated too many hits. And in the introduction, I talked about one of the last things is we're going to look at is communication to external networks. If I click on this, this will take me to my policy. And this is a little bit different way of looking at this. One of the things that I can do is I can go directly to my triggered events. If I click on triggered events, and then I can go over here and filter on just the things that are not resolved, I can start seeing that I have some basic information. So I don't have to go up into all of my events. Now that I'm down to a handful of things that are hitting, and we know that it's still turning itself off, I want to know why. So in the same way that I can filter and move things around and sort things, I can do that under the policy itself, under this triggered events tab that's under this particular policy. I'm going to go ahead and sort by my source address and then by my destination address by holding down my control button. And so now I'll see I have a set of these. And so we see immediately that we have 2 primary addresses here. We have a third one up here that we can investigate for this NTP, but I'm really curious about this one, this 10.100.20.5. And so it looks like it's doing a lot of different things. We're talking over FTP, we're talking over WMI, we're talking about across a bunch of different things. And I want to know why it's trying to talk out. And it looks like it's hitting a lot of different ports. And it looks like it thinks that this may be an engineering workstation. Now, take note that even though this says engineering workstation, it has a number beside it. So it doesn't know exactly what it is. It just knows that it's some kind of server, workstation, that sort of thing. And it also knows that it's talking some kind of industrial protocol. And we'll see this when we get down to the bottom, this Honeywell stuff that's going on. So let's take a look and investigate what's creating this traffic. Like, why is it doing this? WMI and TCP, these custom ports. It looks like it's doing some HTTP, FTP. So it's doing a bunch of different things across here. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to this. I'm going to say, well, let's figure out what's causing this. If I right click on any event that's out there, I can download a capture file. And if I grab this, I'm going to download it. It's going to ask me where I want to save it. And then I'm going to open this up. And I automatically have it set to open this up in Wireshark. Let me see if I can kind of make this a little bigger for you. And the first thing I'm going to notice, which makes it really easy for me, is I see under this MAC address area, I see that this is a Lanner electric device. And so I know, based on my equipment that's in my lab and what's going on, that the manufacturer of the Tenable OT device itself is Lanner. So this gives me kind of a clue to look in and say, hey, is this already my device that's doing this? So if it is my Lanner device, it would be common that it's looking for FTP traffic, especially if I have active turned on in an area where I'm talking about IT-based assets, not OT-based assets. So, and then you'll see the destination was talking out to a Fortinet device. So I'm like, okay, that seems to be okay. What's probably happening here is my device is going out and trying to check and see what's going across this wire and what do I need to look at. So if we go back to our device here, you'll see it was FTP. So what my Tenable OT device is going out and doing is saying, is there any open FTP ports that are out there on that device? This is probably true for my WMI and my TCP, all these looking for these common ports that we know that are out there. It may or may not be communicating with it if it's passive. We may be just seeing this and going across there as we're seeing if those ports are particularly open on that device. So now that we know that that's a Tenable OT device, there's a couple of ways that we can do this. In the past, we've gone in and we've created groups, but I don't necessarily need to do that because there's already a default group for our Tenable OT devices. So we already know that this is a Tenable OT device that's going out and doing this. The second thing I want to do is check to see if 10.100.20 and what that is. So I'm going to download a capture file like I did before. I'm going to hit save. We'll open this one up and we'll check the same thing. Now what you'll notice is we have the same thing. We have this Lanner devices back here as well. So that's good. That means that two of our number two big things that are out there talking are this Lanner device. So instead of going and building a group, we've had some experience in doing that, where we go into asset groups. We could create an asset group by an IP list or by an asset selection. But by default, there's already some groups created for us. So if I do a search on Tenable, what you'll find is we already have this Tenable OT ICPs, Tenable OT Enterprise Managers, and Tenable OT Sensors. Now, if you don't remember, you're not familiar, an ICP is actually the core appliance. And we think that's the core appliance out there talking to those devices. So what I'm going to do inside of this policy that we talked about is I'm going to edit this. And I'm going to say, instead of just being in monitored networks, I'm going to say, and if the source is in this and not in our Tenable ICPs, then I'm gonna trigger on this. So what we're saying is it's all right for our ICP to behave this way. So we're gonna hit next and save. And what that did under our triggered events, now that we have all of this information in here, I'm going to go and say not resolved again. Now that we have these, I'm going to do our source. And from here all the way down to here, I can resolve these. I'm going to say I updated my policy, and I'm going to hit resolve. So now we're only down to one, and that looks like it may be legitimate, where we have to say, are we allowed to reach out to this NTP? Maybe we are, maybe we're not, but I'm not going to go any deeper into this one now that we're just to one event, and I'm going to turn this back on, and hopefully now things have settled out. The second area I want to hit on is conversations in commonly exploited protocols. Now, if you go into this one, what you'll find out is this goes from any asset to any asset. So just like before, where we had a policy that was looking at everything externally or internally, we really want to modify this. So we want to go in and we're going to edit this, and we're going to say, when we have commonly exploited protocols, all we care about is if it's in our monitored network and if it's in our monitored network. Now this is very different than how we did our external policies with the to external or from external. All we're measuring is the internal communication. Why? Because we're already not allowing anything in and out. So it's captured automatically when anything crosses the boundary between what's trusted and not trusted. And then if we're going to allow something to be trusted, we create exceptions to that rule, or we add a special group to it, or we modify a policy to capture those. So in general, we're not too worried about commonly exploited protocols coming in and out, because all protocols should be blocked in and out. So I'm going to modify this so that we're only monitoring inside our monitored assets. I'm going to hit save. And that's going to clean up a lot of our data, but we're still going to have some issues with this policy. If we go out there, we'll see this one's already turned on, but if I go to sort on my protocol, a good example of this will be FTP. So it's like in a traditional IT network, FTP is bad because we are either allowing anonymous logins or we're passing clear text passwords in the protocol. However, in industrial environments, FTP is pretty common, so is Telnet. And you can't just turn off FTP. A lot of times when we're doing controller downloads, controller uploads, not downloads, we're doing controller uploads, a lot of times that's done over FTP. So we can't just get rid of it. A lot of these controllers may not have functionalities to do something like a secure copy or an SCP or something like that, and we need a way of transferring files. Some of them have the ability to move over SMB to push the files to things, but even then that's limited. So sometimes FTP is this necessary evil. But what we can say, instead of checking this out and doing this over this FTP, what we could do is modify this group and say that only certain assets are allowed to do that. So for example, this engineering session on 10.100.20.5 is doing this FTP session, but guess what we know about 10.20.5? That's actually our ICP from the exercise we just went through. So we could go in and we could exclude this because we know that this isn't really true when we're working out there on that event. So I'm going to go to my source address. I'm going to put these in order. See if I can get a few of these here. So then we have like 5 of these that are talking HTTP and FTP that are just a test. So I could go in and modify this policy. And I'm going to say if it's in monitored assets and if it's not in our Tenable OT, ICPs, then we want to trigger. I'm going to save it. And then we know that the 200 here is an ICP. So I'm going to check those. And we know that the 5s are an ICP. So I have all those selected. And now I can go into bulk actions and resolve these. I'm going to filter all my status for not resolved. And we've already started cleaning this up just by knowing what our Tenable OT device is and what it's doing, and then it's testing those connections. But we still have a few other in here that we could dig into. You're going to have to go through these case by case by case because, like I said, a lot of times in industrial environments, we're going to be using some of these more insecure protocols or these protocols that are commonly exploited. You will find stuff in here like HTTPS or SSH every once in a while. It is because those protocols are kind of focused on and looked at. Like, so from an SSH point of view, SSH is pretty secure, but if you look at things like SMB, that's highly dangerous, especially for systems that haven't been patched. It may have something like the Eternal Blue on there. And then you'll also see HTTPS sessions where people are trying to banner grab and stuff like that, even though it's a secure protocol. So don't confuse commonly exploited with insecure. While there may be insecure protocols in this list, don't think about like removing HTTPS or removing SSH, because we still want to watch the activities around those exploited protocols that are out there. All right, I'm going to turn my status back on, and we will move on to a new topic. So let's go to network threats. Now, under network threats, you're going to see that this is different. These are driven by, basically, they're driven by our Suricata rules, or our intrusion detection system. So we're going to treat these a little bit differently. We're going to say, we want to move into a place where we want to modify our groups. But if I were to do that, let's say something like a SYN scan, because we don't want anybody doing that out there. So I'm going to unselect these. I'm just going to do the SYN scan that's out there. And it looks like somebody's probing our network. This is common to see if somebody's doing like an Nmap scan, or somebody's doing a Nessus scan. There's some OWASP like scanners out there so any type of scan that's out there that's looking for a connection or a handshake to identify what devices and ports are available, this is how they would do it. So that's not necessarily a good thing on a network, but it may not be bad either, depending on if it was by design or not. The next thing I'm going to do is, much like some of my others, is I'm going to go in and sort by my source address and then my destination address. And what we'll see is, there we go. And what we'll see is we have this same culprit coming up again. It looks like automatically we have our Tenable OT device out there hitting each and every one of these devices are out here. And it looks like it's a common target as well. But if you look, there's like 115,000 events here. So what I want to do is look at this source address. So I'm going to put a filter here. And I'm going to put a list, and we have 10.100.20.200. And I'm actually going to put another one in here, 10.100.20.5. These are the two that we know are our actual devices. So I'm going to hit apply here. And what we'll see here for not resolved is that we have 94,000 events that are just come from our OT devices. So if I try to go do the same thing we did, and we're about to do this, if I go in and I say, I'm going to edit this policy. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to go to actions, I'm going to edit, and I'm going to say, I want to change my individual asset. So I can do this pretty easily here. So I can go in here for my SYN scan. I'm going to hit add. I'm going to say if it's not in, I'm going to say our Tenable devices. And then we're going to hit next, and we're going to save it off. And so now we've closed this out the same way we did our other devices. So now our 94,000 devices, I can go to resolve all, and I can say I updated my policy. All right. So this is one of those network threats that I can go in and I can clean up. But what about the ones I can't? If I go into this and I look at the individual devices that I can't clean up, how do I handle that? And so let's take something a little bit different for a policy name. Let's look at scans VNC, and we'll apply these. Now you're going to see the same kind of thing here. Is we're going to say, okay, we have 10.100.20.201, And so there's 74 items in here, and we know we can clean these up the same way. You see that my filters are still in place. I just have my 2 IP addresses. Great, I can clean this up as well because I have all of these events and I know this is normal behavior for me to go and look for open ports over VNC stuff. So let's go click into this and we're going to run into a slight problem. I'm going to go to Actions, I'm going to go to Edit, and then I'm going to go to change my source, but I can't change it. And the reason why is like a lot of our individual policies, because they're tied to Suricata, there's not a good way of changing my source and destination. But it says any asset, and I don't really care about it being any asset. I just want to make sure that it's not happening inside my monitored network. But I can't change this. So how do I handle that? So if I hit cancel and I go back here and I have my list, what I can do is I can right click. And one of the things that it gives me the ability to do is exclude from the policy. It's going to bring me up with an exclusion, and I'm going to say, hey, if the source address is 10.100.20.200, and I don't care what the destination is because I know this is normal behavior, and my signature ID is below, which matches to our Suricata rule, we want to say that this is okay. So I'm going to say, we excluded from policy. I'm going to hit exclude for the 200 address, and then I can go grab all of these that are from 200. I'm going to go to bulk actions, resolve. Say I excluded it from policy, and now I've cleaned those up. Now all I have is my .5s, and I can do the same thing again. I can right click, I can exclude from policy. I can say that my source IP, I don't care about my destination, it can talk to anything, and then I want my signature ID for Suricata. Once I have this in here, I can say the same thing. And I can clean these up. So this is the other way you can clean up all your individual policies when you're dealing with Suricata rules, is you can go in, you can exclude from that policy. Now in the 2 examples that we used, we did these bulk kind of cleanups. And like we said, one source can do anything. But usually where you want to use these, if they're Suricata rules or if they're one-off rules. So I'm going to go ahead and resolve these. And clean these up as well. So now I can reset my window here. I'm going to go to my status to say just what's not resolved. And most of those should be cleaned up. So this is really like when we get into this policies and events, you've seen the 2 ways to do this over the last 3 parts of this. So I'm going to be moving on in our next episodes. We're going to move away from events and policies and that sort of stuff. And we're going to start moving into inventory. And as we start talking about inventory, we'll start talking about risk and how we read risk within the organization. Within the organization and within the tool. So for now, have a great day. Please like this video if it's helped out. Leave comments. I check them all the time if you have questions. Have a great day.